So, I've been wanting to talk about the 2020 presidential election in some form or another for the past couple of months, ever since it became pretty clear that Biden was going to be the person to go up against Trump. Um, I wasn't sure how to do it because I have to be very careful with the way I say what I want to say, and I know people's feelings are very strong on this issue, and I've tried to be respectful of that throughout my commentary in this political season. So I'm going to continue to try and be as careful with my wording as I possibly can and as respectful of other people's opinions. But I do have thoughts on this election that I think are important and that I want to share. I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I possibly can. But so the election is starting to take some sort of a moral imperative narrative, especially from Biden supporting liberals and leftists, that if we don't remove Trump from office in this election, it's going to be the end of democracy. It's going to be a disaster for the United States, and the country may not recover from it. I want to say up front that I completely reject that notion, and I think people who say that are completely overestimating how much of an impact Biden can have in his administration. So that entire premise rests upon the fact that Biden and Kamala Harris, because now she's going to be the vice presidential running mate, that entire premise rests on the notion that they are going to do enough change to counteract whatever Trump has done that liberals find so existential. And I want to completely reject that notion. Biden is not going to be a transformational president. Harris is not going to be a transformational president. They've said so themselves. Biden said to his donors, nothing will fundamentally change. And even after he rolled out this grandiose environmental plan, he turned back to his Wall Street donors and said, don't worry, guys. I didn't actually mean any of that stuff. I'm not actually going to raise your taxes. I'm not going to propose any legislation that'll raise your taxes or anything like that. I'm not going to change anything. He says it right out front. And where does that have the most impact? Well, let's look back at Obama era policy. Many of the systemic problems that we have under Trump really did start with Obama. So let's look at the situation at the border. One of the key issues for liberals is the situation at the border, the children in cages. That is an existential problem. Absolutely. Who do we have coming in to replace Trump? The vice president from the Obama administration, who literally built the camps. Now, I know you're not allowed to say that in, the polite society. You're not allowed to say that Obama built the camps. It's just a fact. It's just a fact that those camps were built under Obama and that Biden was totally okay with it. There's video of Biden from one of his older presidential runs, and he's run for president 4 or 5 times. Got crushed each time, by the way. He literally was talking about the need for a wall. Anyone who tries to tell me that Biden is going to be a gigantic change on immigration policy, I completely reject that. Also, under the Obama administration, he was called the deporter in chief. He deported a record number of people. More than Reagan, more than George W. Bush, more than Donald Trump. Harsh truth, but it's just the truth, and it's got to be said. Another key area of focus for me personally, and for a lot of people I know, is foreign policy, U.S. imperialism overseas. And has Biden given any indication that he would like to change that sort of policy? No. No. How likely is it that he will end the regime change effort in Venezuela? Extremely unlikely. I don't know for sure if Biden personally has endorsed Juan Guaido, the shadow president of Venezuela, who actually isn't in charge of anything. But I have absolutely no doubt that he will kowtow to Obama era neoliberal globalist type foreign policy wonks that probably want Juan Guaido in power and want to pursue regime change in Venezuela. I have no doubt about that because You look at probably the leading Democrat right now in terms of power, Nancy Pelosi. Who was there at Trump's State of the Union applauding Juan Guaido, who Trump brought as one of his special guests? Nancy Pelosi. So overjoyed to see Juan Guaido in person. So I think that's a disastrous course of action for the United States to take. I think that we should have absolutely no role in Venezuela whatsoever. It's none of our business. We shouldn't be doing anything with Venezuelan politics, but yet here we are because we're the United States and we control everything. So another issue where Biden is going to continue to be disastrous. The Saudi genocide of Yemen started under Obama. Another catastrophic issue that was just compounded by the Obama administration. And anyone who says that Biden is going to be a significant improvement on that issue is just wrong. They're just wrong. We cannot accept the continued genocide of the Yemeni people. And the United States' role in that conflict has been key. I mean, we refuel Saudi jets in the air, and then they go and proceed to bomb Yemeni children. We blockade the area. We refuse to allow food and medicine and PPE during the coronavirus pandemic. We cannot allow that to happen. And under a Biden-Harris administration, I have absolutely no doubt that the genocide in Yemen will continue, if not get worse. Expecting Biden and Harris to end that conflict it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Are there areas of foreign policy where Biden may be better? Yes, and you have to acknowledge that. Could he return to an Obama era focus on Cuba? Could he improve relations with Cuba? Hopefully, maybe. I don't know for sure, but there's a possibility. Will he re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement? Yes, most likely, yes, he will, and that is a serious positive, and we do need to acknowledge that. And this gets me to a point that I want to make, that to say that Biden is completely equivalent to Donald Trump is foolish, and that's not an argument I'm trying to make. I think leftists who may ideologically agree with me that try to make that point are not being nuanced enough in their take, and they need to step back, reevaluate their own biases, and say, yes, there are areas of Biden's policy that you have to acknowledge they will be better. He's going to have better federal appointees. He's going to probably appoint better people to housing and urban development, the labor department, the education department. Removing Betsy DeVos from office is a very I would like to see Betsy DeVos removed from the education department. He'll probably appoint someone to the Environmental Protection Agency that believes in science and that will not continue the acceleration of climate change. He'll have better court picks. The court picks under Trump and the amount of conservative judges that have been allowed to get through under Democratic Congresses. Chuck Schumer just, blank check, allowing McConnell and Trump to appoint as many conservative justices as they want. Putting a stop to that is good. And if Biden were actually to follow through on his economic platform that he's put out, which is, you have to acknowledge, it is good. There are many key areas of it that I personally like to see a lot. If he actually follows through on that, that'd be great. It's important to acknowledge those things as well. And to make a complete equivalence between Biden and Trump, like I said, is not nuanced enough, and it's not correct. So, but are those things going to be enough for me personally to pull the lever for Biden? No, because the key policy priorities for me and the things that I think are the most prescient issues that the next president has to address, Biden has made very clear that he has absolutely no intention of following through on them. What are those issues? I have probably three big ones. Is continued U.S. imperialism. Medicare for all, providing government-funded health care for everyone in the country, and ending the corruption in Washington, D.C., money in politics. And on all three of those issues, Biden either does not address it, or he has made it incredibly clear that he has no plan to address it whatsoever. So we're talking about a Democrat in the year 2020 during a pandemic that has killed 160,000 people, where people are losing their jobs left and right. We have a real unemployment rate of around 20%, and a country where people's health care is tied to their employment. And we have a Democrat running for president who said he would veto Medicare for all if it got to his desk, if it managed to pass the Congress, which may end up being controlled by Democrats. I mean, the Senate's in play. Doesn't look like the House is going to go back to the Republicans. We have a Democrat that said he would veto Medicare for all, which, especially among Democrats, is an overwhelmingly popular policy. For me, honestly, that's strike one, you're out. That is such a complete abdication of your duty as a public servant, to not only to serve the people in your base of your party, but to address the pressing issues in the country. If you can't even take seriously probably the most important issue of our time in 2020, which is the pandemic, and provide a solution to it that would help absolutely everybody affected by it, then I'm sorry, strike one, you're out. That's such a huge issue in that and Biden just falls so much short. What's he proposing? He's proposing a public option, which would give everyone in the country the ability to use Medicare instead of private plans. But the private plans are just going to undercut the public option. The public option does not work. I mean, it's been implemented in, I believe, a couple of states have tried it, and I know a couple other developed countries have tried it as well. It's not a policy that works. That's why you call Medicare for all single payer. The government has to be the single payer for healthcare, and if you have private companies undercutting that, and they're going to be able to provide better service and better quality of care because they're going to have more money because they're privately funded. It just logically it makes sense. If you have that the government alternative to that, naturally it's going to be underfunded, just like every other government program we have in this country, the VA, the transportation department, all of these other like public schools, all of these things that have competition, they end up getting undercut by the private alternative because the private alternative has more money. That's the importance of single payer. And I'm digressing a little bit from the main point here, but I think that's important to acknowledge that Biden's plan does not take seriously the healthcare issue in this country. And for me, that's strike one, you're out, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. For overseas wars, Biden has shown that he wants to continue to escalate with Russia. The Democrats are absolutely obsessed with escalating with Russia. They've been pushing the Russiagate conspiracy for the entirety of the Trump administration and given him ample fuel to swat away any legitimate criticism of him that may arise. And there is so much legitimate criticism of Trump. He has been such an absolute abject disaster. But yet, Democrats spent probably the first 3 years of his presidency, Russia, Russia, Russia. Robert Mueller is going to be the white knight that comes into the White House and drags Trump out in handcuffs. And what came of it? What came of the Mueller report and of Russiagate? Absolutely nothing. It was a complete disaster. It was a complete failure. Robert Mueller gave us absolutely nothing in his testimony, and Trump remains in office. And Trump's policies towards Russia have arguably been incredibly hawkish, moving troops to Russia's border, NATO troops. doing constant flyovers in Russian airspace and having American jets and Russian jets fly neck and neck with each other. I mean, the whole Russiagate thing is such a disaster, and to have someone in office that's going to fuel that new Cold War, that red baiting Russophobia is incredibly damaging, and we need to acknowledge that. He's also going to continue escalating with China, and this is the thing that the establishments in both parties are pushing Trump and Biden to do is escalate with China. I think that's such a disaster to continue the United States foreign policy of, it's all, the world is a geopolitical chessboard, and we have to make better geopolitical moves than Russia and China. It's absurd, and it's going to lead to conflict, and you cannot afford to have conflict with China. You just cannot afford that, and Biden escalating with Russia and China is so damaging. It's going to lead to further proxy conflicts in the Middle East. It's going to lead to more worldwide destabilization, and it's just not good for the world. And we have to acknowledge that. We cannot pretend that Biden is going to be some sort of a savior on that issue. And the last thing, money in politics. Money in politics and the corruption in Washington, D.C. is the problem that fuels all the other problems. And Biden is probably one of the most corrupt Democrats, one of the most corrupt people in government right now. He comes from the state of Delaware, which is basically used as a corporate tax haven because Delaware has very corporate-friendly tax laws. And at one time, he was known as the senator basically straight up representing a credit card company. I don't remember the exact name of the credit card company, but this is Joe Biden's political identity. He takes gigantic amounts of money from corporations and corporate PACs, and for a large part, it drives his policy. And if you're going to have any sort of serious change in the United States government, it needs to be through addressing the corruption in Washington, D.C. Joe Biden has shown that he's completely uninterested in doing so. And with that in mind, we know exactly what Biden's administration is going to be. It's going to be a continuation of Obama-era neoliberal, corporatist, globalist governing. Now, is that better than what we have with Trump, which is basically neo-fascist, far right-wing, evangelical influenced Republican governance? Yes. And I've said that before, and I've said that again. And so let's get down to what I think others should do. To be honest with you, it's really none of my business. Whatever you do in this election, I will not judge you in any way. If you're voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris simply for the reason of getting Donald Trump out of office, by all means go right ahead, and you're going to get no heat from me. That's a totally ethically justified thing. If you think that's the right thing to do for even the most marginal of harm reduction purposes, by all means, go right ahead and do it. And I might even encourage others, people I know in swing states, to do the same. If you live in a state like California or New York or Massachusetts, like where I am, there's no good reason to vote for Joe Biden. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to tell others to do it in safe states. There's no good reason to do it. Yeah, so that's basically where I stand on the election. I'm sure many of you will have strong feelings on this. I welcome discussion. I welcome having my mind changed. I honestly would love a good reason to vote for Joe Biden. I would love to get Trump out of office because I hate Trump. I think Trump is a monster and a disaster. I have seen absolutely zero affirmative reasons to vote for Joe Biden, and for that reason, I will not do so. I will not vote simply to remove someone from office if I think the alternative is going to be almost as damaging and in many cases, as I've laid out here in detail, just as damaging. So if you did take the time to watch this, thank you very much. I may look into making more video content in the future. Yeah, and let me know what you think. Thank you.